Hey, how's it going? My name is Harrison Burns, and today we have a special guest for Grieving Teens. Would you please give me your name, the billet that you held, your age, occupation, and for how long you held said billet? Go ahead.
Hi, Bob Hicks, 42 years in education. 20 some years of that was in Desert Sands Unified School District. Started as a teacher and then 15 years as administrator, assistant principal, working at district office in ed services, and then principal at Palm Desert High School for 8 years. And
Well,
what
Bob, I
else?
appreciate you joining me. Thank you for your
That's
time.
it.
Anyway, I wanted to ask you how Tom Morris actually initially approached you with the idea of implementing a grief group at your school.
I met Tom when I started at Palm Desert High School. Actually, the first year I started in the springtime, getting moved to the new campus, and then he had contacted me, and we met in the fall of that first year. And he proposed the idea to me. It was something that I responded to positively from the get-go because of my experience at the district office. I was the director of child welfare and attendance and oversaw the suicide protocol, helped develop the suicide protocol. That was one of my responsibilities when I moved into that job. And so I dealt with discipline. I dealt with issues with students who had issues. And so having someone to help in that area before issues arise, or major issues, having somebody that is willing to help, I was all for it. And so it didn't take long for me to say yes when he asked me that question. Then it was just a question of getting clearance through personnel and through all the fingerprinting, which I think he had a certain level by that point in time already. And then hitting the go button so he could get started. Locations and logistics were every year it was kind of a maze to figure out exactly where he was going to be, what days, what periods, that sort of thing. But we got rolling.
My next question to you is, what was the response like from other staff and teachers concerning the proposal to start the groups? Was it positive?
I would say, generally speaking, yes. There are always a few naysayers. Sometimes there's people saying, wait a minute, why are we dealing with these psychological issues? Shouldn't we have a professional? Well, guess what? Tom's a professional. And then the issue of missing a class from time to time. Sometimes that's frowned upon by the teacher that feels their content is critical. And when we played that by ear as well, when there's especially something that's required for graduation, an English class or something like that, we'd work with the teacher to try to coordinate the right day and period to miss so that Tom could arrange for that student to be there and be in that group.
Okay. Well, what were some of the initial challenges that you faced as the principal on the administrative side of things due to the groups being established, if at all?
Logistically, the hoops that you have to jump through at the district office to make sure everything is okay. Similar to what we did with you. Remember the dog you brought in?
Yes,
remember,
of course. Yeah, my emotional
long,
support golden.
all that stuff we had to go through with letter for this and approval from that.
Mm-hmm.
Just having the steadfastness to work through those logistics that are required at the district level, so it's approved and you get the stamp of approval, and as it ends up, you can get a school board stamp of approval and a superintendent approving on it. And I worked with student assistance program when I was at the district office. I oversaw child welfare and attendance and the student assistance program, and that became a model that the whole county started to work with. So I thought this was another tentacle of that program, that type of program that could help on the county level or even farther. I know there are so many high schools searching for help. Part of the issue is funding. The other part is programs that are trusted, that nobody's going to make a mistake with human being. That's where I came from with the student assistance program and suicide protocols. An emphasis that we had was there is no throwaway life. It doesn't exist. Everyone is worth saving, no matter what it is that they have an issue with. We need to find a way, find that. And philosophically, for me, I call it a trigger. Everybody has a trigger. You want to figure out what that trigger is to help them get to where they want to be for their life, whatever their vision, whatever their plan is for their life. And I think Tom helped in a lot of ways with a lot of students in that way, seeing their life with all of the things that may have impacted them going on. And what's next? How do we get to the next step? And for some of those kids, it's really, really tough recovery. And Tom was one aspect of what they were getting assistance from. We also had the counselors. We even had counselors that would come over from the district office from time to time, but they knew Tom was there. And he was a resource that could be used to help smooth things out for a student who is going through or had gone through. And we had students whose relatives had committed suicide. We had students whose brothers or dads or sisters or mothers had been involved in gang activity, human trafficking, you name it, whatever it was, we had it.
Well, that's interesting. Another question to you. How often did the grief group get brought up to you as an administrator, whether it was positive influence or negative influence by either teachers or staff or parents? And I'm curious to know as well, did the grief group pretty much run itself, or did you have to get involved and kind of micromanage?
There was zero micromanaging. Logistics, like I said, every year, trying to figure out time and place and which students, that sort of thing. I'm sorry, what was the other part of the question?
The first part was just how often in the grief group would get brought up to you as a principal, whether it was by teachers and staff or parents?
Very rarely. Sometimes there was a parent who heard about it and wanted their child in it. Single mom, single dad, sometimes, usually issues going on, and a counselor or someone had mentioned it to them, or maybe another student, and it was on the positive side of things, wanting to get in, be a part of it. I can count on one hand in 8 years how many times there was a negative, and it was just, when that did happen, it was just an explanation of how this whole thing works, because it was somebody from the outside wanting to know what was going on. And the teachers, once it got rolling, the teachers who had been there were very good at helping other teachers understand why this is a good thing, and we need to make it work for whatever the student's name was.
Of course, which actually leads me to my next question to you is, how did the students improve as a result of attending the groups? Was their academic performance as well as their social behavior improved, and was it significant?
I don't have hard data. It would be anecdotal in that sort of a thing. And people that you interview as you go through this process are the ones that are going to be the real people that can tell you how it impacted them. From my perspective, on the outside, hearing how things worked, it was very positively across the board. There were a couple instances when we had issues with conflict inside the group with one student saying something that offended another student. But again, in my time period there was, I can count that on one hand. And those were dealt with usually by Tom with individual meetings with those students, and got squared away with that. Let's see, I would say the impact academically. We also had another group of students, and some of them may have been part of Tom's group, that emotionally disturbed, to use an old term. That group of students is part of special ed group, special education class, and they'll perform high academically, typically, but they're up and down. And this is a group where if we can keep their surrounding, or the people that they're working with, having them on the positive, on level emotional circumstances as much as possible, they're good as gold. But when they hit that high or low, it can be bad, not just for them, but everyone in their classroom, sometimes impacting the whole school with maybe a fight that takes place. The first year or so as principal there, we had a few fights, but as time went on, we were known for not having fights on campus. They knew it was not acceptable. It was very rare. We did have, for a while, had the practice soccer field out back open during lunchtime. Well, we found out that that's not good, because kids would go out there and, hey, it's grass. We can have a fight and roll and tumble on there. So we had more supervision. That became a non-issue. And not to say that those were those types of kids necessarily, but
of course.
But that type of intervention with behavior beforehand affects the negative interactions that happen with other students at lunchtime or passing period or during another class, and you have a more academic classroom. And I think that expectation of those students, and I know that's part of what Tom worked with them, part of the plan for the future. How do you get there? And coordinating with counselors. I know several times I was talking with counselors about students, and they would talk about Tom's input and plan for where they should go, or planning for their future, or maybe even for the next year of high school. So anecdotally, overwhelmingly positive.
So it seems like there's very little downside in terms of an administrative side of things to implementing these such groups.
Yeah. Key to that being Tom.
Yes.
I've been around long enough to know that it's all about who, not always so much how. That person being able to make that connection and have the proper training, like student assistance program. That group of people, very special people, and that's key to having the training. You can train like you did, train your dog, but is your dog going to be able to do the same things? No, you got to have people that have the perspective that needs to be part of their human being to do this. It's not everybody can do it.
Yes, I would agree. Second to last question. So for other administrators who might be watching this, would you recommend groups such as this, or even this particular one, to be implemented at their schools?
Absolutely. There's fear. There's a fear factor what if. It comes from the teachers. You'll get something from the parents, and principals who don't have the background possibly that I had, where I was dealing with students and all the negative or many aspects of the negative things that could happen: expulsion hearings, discipline hearing panels, attendance review boards, all that sort of stuff. I saw a lot of things from the underbelly, to use another term, the negative side of things, what could happen, and things that people didn't see, didn't even know were happening in the district of 32,000 kids at the time. So I came into it, yes, absolutely, let's do this. But someone who maybe came up and didn't have, through the system as a teacher, then as a whatever, usually they go into some sort of a job where they're working with other teachers in another way before they become an assistant principal. Maybe they're teaching teachers how to use technology, or training them in how to teach certain things in the classroom. Maybe they're district office ed services person that is a specialist in math or English. And then they become an assistant principal, and then they become a principal. They would not have seen that. And there's fear there, because they're the one that is going to make that decision on if the program is implemented at their campus, unless the school board makes a decision, this is going to happen at every campus. My answer to them would be, what's the worst that can happen? You save a life.
Yes.
No is worth wasting. You save a life. You might have some naysayers, but you save a life. So you work closely with the person, the program, make sure they have all the training possible, and let that person go. And you trust them with what they're going to be doing, and depend on the training that they went through, and you enable success by making sure all the logistics are in place. If I had to do it all over again, I'd be exactly the same way. Yes, there are a few issues, but by far and away, the culture, those individual kids, there's no question. You do it.
All right. Last question to you. Would you want to say anything else for the record concerning Tom Moore's, the groups as a whole, or anything that you'd like to say out there for administrators who might be watching this?
Okay, one of the questions I didn't ask you before we started this is, where's this going? Who might see this video?
This is just for showcasing how Grieving Teens has impacted the lives of individuals, people who have been a part of the group, and also those watching it to financially support the group and send their love via a financial donation to support these types of groups and individuals who run them, i.e. Tom Morris himself, so that he can continue to do this even as the situation of the world with, COVID-19 has affected quite adversely a lot of school systems and a lot of districts that don't have kids physically in schools anymore, that we can still do remote things. We can still do this without the need for being physically there, even though that is a big part of it.
Yeah.
So that's the purpose.
Well, let me relate what you just gave me back to my job before principal, again, child welfare and attendance, and director of the student assistance program.
Certainly.
Their funding was not budgeted. It was grant funded. And I was the one that had to write those grants, $1 million grants, $1 million+ grants, in order to fund those programs. We also had money from some of the communities in the valley there that would put into the student assistance program to make sure it ran in their cities. That is a ton of work. So having someone to help make sure you're funded in my case was, well, let me go back a generation before I started the district office. It was a full-time job for one person. When I started the district, they combined two jobs, student assistance program director and director of child welfare and attendance into one position. Before me, it was one guy doing just student assistance program, and it's a full-time job to coordinate and seek funding, talk to the right people. It's a worthwhile project, because how can you not help kids who need help? What other program is there that does this? Mm-hmm. There is none. You have counselors, but their focus is academic. They coordinate and they talk with kids. They don't have the facility to, and the time in their contract to bring in a group of kids, or maybe rotate a group of kids in at every school site. Although there are some that have tried to develop those types of programs, they always seem to fall by the wayside. This is a program that if it's not funded by a school board, needs to be funded by individuals or communities or grants to help those kids succeed, because they do. With this help, they succeed. Without the help, there's no tangible evidence, no anecdotal evidence even, to see how these kids succeed. You have to go branch out to so many different programs and kids who aren't even in programs to see what happened to them. I don't know of anything happened that gathered that type of thing before I retired 3 years ago. Didn't exist. And I used to attend all the meetings at the county level, Riverside County Office of Education, for student assistance program, people who wanted to do that, and directors of child welfare and attendance. Didn't happen. People were trying to recreate the wheel when there were already wheels out there that could be funded, like the student assistance program. This is a program that has a different type of niche, but it's a niche that needs to be filled. And when, uh-oh, I lost you. There you are. Okay. The issue with funding and maybe Zoom and kids not being at school, ask anybody, is this causing more stress or less stress? Without a doubt, it's more stress. And those kids not being able to come to school to talk to other people, maybe just their friends. And maybe sometimes there were cases where it was, this student is too focused on one friend, whether it was a boyfriend, girlfriend, or just another friend that is taking them down the wrong road. And we were able to intervene with student assistance program or through Tom's program. Without some sort of a program supplying an outlet and that connection, that's a lost soul. And no soul is worth losing. God bless them all. You know, they're dealing with things that need help. And the standard school setup, especially with Zoom classes, teachers don't have the connection. A lot of referrals came from teachers. Something going on in the classroom, you know, it's like you got off on the wrong side of the bed. But then he did it 10 days in a row. And I asked the question, oh, there's a lot going on with that kid. That's beyond my pay scale, teacher of math says, which is what I taught. Let me see if I can get you some help. Do you trust me? Yes, Mr. Hicks, you're one of the teachers that I'll trust. okay, come with me. Let's talk to somebody who might be able to find somebody to help, but I will be with you until we find somebody. That sort of thing doesn't happen in the classroom now when the classroom is virtual, because you don't notice it. So it's even more critical now to have that sort of connection.
Ability to connect.
Yeah. And I don't know what kind of model you would have. There might be some individual Zoom time along with group Zoom time. But now you're talking about more funding, maybe, but then maybe there's less funding because you don't take up a classroom, you don't take up a group meeting hall. Somebody's got to figure out the logical steps to make something like that happen on a campus where nobody knows how regular instruction works, much less a counseling session works. I just talked to my successor, the principal at Palm Desert High School. I talked to him last week, and he's it's like trying to build a plane. You've heard this before, build a plane while you're flying it. There's things that he thinks might be coming up, and he's saying, I don't know how that's going to happen. It just doesn't seem possible. And then you look at the elementary, and maybe that's possible at the elementary school, but not the high school. So your administrators know how things are going to happen. And so trying to implement something like this on a homeschooling type level, where your teacher's coming in through your tablet or computer, is going to be even more arduous than it was when we did it at Palm Desert High School. So it'll be a long, slow process and a lot of sales to try to talk people into it. But I cannot even fathom why you would not do this if it was an option for some just knowing the kids that it helped at Palm Desert High School and succeeded because of it.
Especially with the whole rise of mental illness going around, especially due to coronavirus and everyone being shut in and quarantined and alone. So having that social program and that ability to contact others is supremely important, at least in my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I agree 110%. And being a math guy, that's a lot.
I like that. Yeah, your math is blowing my mind.
Yeah.
Well, Mr. Hicks, I appreciate your time, and it has been educational. I know that you're looking at my easy button behind me. I'll go ahead and press that for the record.
There we go. That was easy. Thanks for making it for me. Appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you so much.
Take care.